Welcome to the agenda, the first of a two-part season review. With me, as always, is Jay Clark from the Herald Sun. Jay, great way to finish the season. A big win over the D's at the MCG.
Yeah, very strong finish, Chris. And there were some positional moves in that last game, which I thought really showed some potential. Maynard in the middle, Grundy forward, some big marks, and Darcy Moore, as you've been calling for. He looked pretty natural at centre-half back. So we might see some more scope there for him to swing across the two possessions next year. But this year, look, it was disappointing. A roller coaster year, and really the team failed in the first half when the pressure was on. That's when it counted, and the Pies were 2-6. Wells came back in, Elliott came back in, and the second half of the year, particularly playing for the coach, was much more positive. So look, I think the watermark, Collingwood, you would have to say, is pretty high because Collingwood beat Sydney, beat Geelong, really pushed GWS, smashed the Crows for a half, and then beat West Coast and Melbourne. So against the top sides, pretty capable. But there's a consistency and particularly a connection issue midfield forward that needs to be ironed out. It's a big pre-season ahead, Chriso. What did you specifically like from this year?
There were a couple of things that I thought were really big positives, and the first one was Will Hoskin-Elliott. Now, went under the radar a fair bit of the season, but played 22 games, kicked 18 goals, averaged over 18 disposals a game. And the thing I liked about Will Hoskin-Elliott was his ability to get up on the wing and be a really good running type marking player, but also to go forward in clutch moments and have an impact. And we saw what he did against Sydney with that late goal.
He's strong overhead.
And that's his great asset, and he's quick. So in terms of best position, I reckon he's got a couple. I reckon the wing and deep forward. I don't think he's the real linking half forward, getting up at the ball, but I think his running ability across in terms of playing on the wing. But I think he's dangerous matchup when he's pushed deep forward. And the other positive, which you touched on, certainly was the reappointment of Nathan Buckley. I think what the team showed over the last 6 or 8 weeks showed, as you touched on, they played for the coach, and I think that's a really positive move. But what I'm excited about going forward is that the upper capability of the group can match it with the best teams. Up by 50 points against Adelaide showed how well the team can play, and then up against Melbourne by 5 goals. Sorry, Geelong by 5 goals, and then of course, as we've mentioned, beating Melbourne.
That is nice, blue sky. Particularly Will Hoskin-Elliott deep forward, like it's almost a Dangerfield sort of one-out position. Dustin Martin does it for Richmond, so that'll be interesting to see if he can build his body strength maybe a bit more. But some crosses. So what are the big issues over the summer? I think, and this has probably flown under the radar, ground ball gets in the forward line. So we've spoken about needing another key forward for Collingwood, but I think their smaller or mid-sized players, Elliott and Fasolo, are actually taller, or play taller. So I think there is probably a list management issue around getting a high pressure crumbing forward. And we saw probably Jared Blair used a bit of that, and he's probably coming to the end of his career, to be honest. So I think in terms of a trade prospect or trade priority this year, it's getting a smaller forward who can pressure, pick the ball up off the deck, because Collingwood probably ranked...
Well, they tried to do that last year and got Chris Mayne, but that didn't work, did it?
Yeah, and even he's still probably more of a marking player. So I think that's probably a list priority that hasn't been talked about too much. The other one is, and I mentioned this earlier, the ball use. So Collingwood, when they play daring, attacking, quick football can look very damaging, especially when Daniel Wells in the side. But there were some parts of the season, parts in games where the ball use was terrible. So it's getting more consistency there. I know they've got a skill acquisition coach who's doing some very good things, but I think over the summer, ball use obviously has to be a big priority because the defence otherwise stood up a bit. Now,
we've got a couple of shout-outs, a couple of recognition. We've picked one player each just to give a little pump up to. And I'll go first, and my man is Josh Thomas.
Unsung hero.
I reckon it was an unbelievable year for him. Now, he only played 9 games, but once he got in, he wasn't dropped. He was really consistent, and to think that he spent 2 years out of the game, not 1 but 2 years out of the game to work his way back into the team and be an integral part of the team. He averaged 16 disposals, which you think, okay, well, that's not super, but he played predominantly as a half forward, not in the midfield, which I think ultimately he'll end up playing. So for him to come back and do what he did after 2 years out of the game, I reckon was absolutely sensational. And what it does with another big pre-season under his belt, he's going to be primed in 2018 to have a great year, I reckon.
That game against the Gold Coast, just thought he showed some cleanness, particularly in the wet conditions, in tight contested situations. That cleanness, no fumbles, that's what every list manager's looking for, and he showed a bit of that.
Now, what about you?
Well, mine was Tyson Goldsack.
The Goldie.
Yeah, the sack is a favourite of mine. Look, this guy essentially stood up playing centre-half back all year. We've talked a lot about Jeremy Howard, Ben Reid and Lyndon Dunn, but Tyson Goldsack, I thought, took on some really big jobs. Josh Kennedy probably got a hold of him, but look, for a guy who has battled injuries his whole year, finally got some consistency, 20 games, I thought, and was just someone who Nathan Buckley clearly could count on, I thought, most weeks. And the game against Fremantle, where he essentially played out the whole match with a busted collarbone. Yeah. Now, I'd say that's probably one of the most courageous acts we've seen all season from Tyson Goldsack. He's earned another one-year deal, which should be finalised soon if it hasn't already. And I just thought he's a popular clubman, a glue guy who really deserves some recognition. I think in the best and fairest is a chance to finish top 10, which at the start of the year, you're wondering whether he's either in the best 22.
Yeah, no, well done. Now, let's get back to our pre-season predictions.
Accountability.
Now, we've had the opportunity to revise, but first let's take look at your pre-season predictions.
Yep.
Ninth.
Yeah, didn't
quite get there.
Didn't think they were a top 8 side, especially with a tougher draw. That'll soften a bit next year. Cope on Scotty Panderbury. I still think he played 16 games, had a very good year.
If he plays 22, he would be in the mix for the Copeland, wouldn't he?
Unquestionably, yeah. What he said would be his 6th in a row. I thought the All-Australian selectors erred a little bit, having Treloar in the All-Australian squad of 40 ahead of this guy, but that's their call, Kevin Bartlett, etc. Braden Maynard, most improved. I reckon that was a good call, Chris.
I reckon it was a very good call.
We have seen some growth there. Yeah. And Reid, most important, well, he got swung forward and was very important forward. That's a huge question mark. Does he play centre forward or centre back next year? Now,
so you've changed, now you've revised.
Jeremy Howe, what a pickup. I thought he played with great consistency, intercept marked and used the ball. So he's got the balance there with his game style. Thought he had an unbelievable season. Most improved Maynard, well, that's just a little pat on the back from a pre-season prediction because we saw him really grow and develop. And most important, more. Now,
does he more? Most important?
Neck going ahead. So over the first 6 rounds of this year, I reckon he probably struggled with that forward connection. The forward line totally changed. And then we saw a man, age, 21, play some very encouraging football in a very difficult position, largely on his own at times. And then in the last round, he shines at centre-half back. So I think with a new long-term contract extension, we're going to see this guy's footy go to a new level next year. What about you, Chris?
Well, I had finishing 8, so I was one worse than you, so a bit out there. Copeland Trophy, I had Brodie Grundy. Now,
top 3.
He missed a couple of games late in the season due to suspension,
might hurt him.
Which might hurt him, but I think he's going to be around the mark. Most improved. Look, for most of the year that was wrong, but I reckon the last 2 games, Mason Cox actually showed what he is capable of, and I'm pretty excited about Cox going forward because I think he might be able to measure up. And I also had Ben Reid as most important. Well, that's another story for another day. Still, Sidebottom has been amazingly consistent. He's been, and over the last 3 or 4 years, he's been runner-up, he's been 3rd, he's been knocking on the door behind Scott Pendlebury. I think this year is his year. Most improved, I think we saw towards the end of the season how good Jordan De Goey is. I think he's going to be a star. Talk more about that as we go on. And most important, now I've put Daniel Wells purely because, Jay, the stats don't lie.
No. When he plays?
10 games he played in, Collingwood lost once, which is remarkable. Now, I know he's not going to play every game in season 2018, but when he plays, Collingwood seem to win. And I think that's really the mark. And he's a class player. We know that. We know he uses the ball superbly. So I've put him down as most important. All right.
Your Monday moment for the year, Chris?
Yeah, now we've had all through the year, for those of you who have tuned into the agenda, we've had our Monday moment each week where we've gone back and determined our moment of the year. And this is my moment. Adam Treloar, round 3 at the SCG, tight game. He got it behind the centre line. One bounce, handball over the top, the old 1-2, and then from 55, bang. Now, if that is not inspirational, that is not the moment of the year. Well, I'll go here, but look at that. That's what we hope and expect from Adam Treloar, his ability to run, break the lines, and then deliver from 55. That was a moment.
Very good. In a big game, or a strong run and carry player.
I don't think you could match that.
Well,
I really don't.
Just take a look at this, Chriso, because I bring some big guns to this show, mate. And you'll see that this highlight from Jeremy Howe. So this was over Tommy McDonald there. An absolute spectacular mark. We see it every week. That was his first one against Melbourne, against his old side. And then again at the weekend over Christian Petrarca. How do you like them apples track? That was an absolute scream. And the fact that it was so close to the Melbourne faithful, Chriso, just adds an extra sort of spoonful of sugar on these grabs. So Jeremy Howe, we saw it every week, didn't we?
He's going to get Mark of the Year, isn't he? Has to.
Mate,
has to.
For the next 5 years, I would have thought, on that sort of form. So against his old team, how could you miss that one, Jeremy Howe?
Well, Jay, we're out of time.
Yep.
Now, this is our penultimate show. Look out for our final show because we're going to look forward to the future, particularly 2018. So tune in for that. But that's all we've got time for in this edition of The Agenda. See you soon.